You may be seated. Good morning, church. I first of all thank God for this wonderful opportunity that He has given me to preach His word in the church today. And I thank Mr. Adams to invite me for this opportunity, giving me this opportunity to share the word today. And of course, all the leaders of the church, pastors and leaders, I believe as I'm going to share the word today, God is going to speak to each one of us today with His words, and this is going to be a blessed time for all of us. The scripture portion has been taken from two different places. One is from the New Testament, and the other one is from the Old Testament. In the New Testament, when Jesus traveled from Judea to Galilee, He had to come through Samaria, and He met the Samaritan woman. And in the conversation, Jesus told her that the true worshippers, as we read in verse 23 and 24, the true worshippers must worship the Lord in spirit and truth. When I was pondering into and preparing myself, this message today, God spoke to me and told me, "What do you think about true worship? What do you understand by true worship?" Then He took me way back to Genesis chapter 22, and He gave me the whole passage from verse 1 to 14. In that, God showed me the life of His servant, how He sacrificed, how He took His son to the Mount Moriah in order to sacrifice him there. And He obeyed the commandment of God. He went there. And God showed me that this is what is called the true worship. Many a times we have a strange idea about what a true worship is. We think sitting in the church, listening to the sermon, and have the choir speak, sing the songs, then we wait till the church ends, we go back, and then we live the same life what we used to be early. We have a different perspective as to what a true worship is. But God is going to tell us what really true worship is through this sermon today. In the verse, let me first of all tell you, the word worship is first mentioned in Genesis chapter 22, verse 5. The word worship was first mentioned there. And we can have several times in the Bible, the word worship is mentioned in most of the places, here and there. As for the dictionary, the meaning of this word is reverence or devotion for a deity. But this word, which is translated and appear first in Genesis chapter 22, verse 5, the word worship comes from a Hebrew word that means to bow down, to prostrate oneself. In the New Testament, worship comes from a word that means to kiss the hand in a token of reverence. Today, as I'm going to preach today on this topic, the act of genuine worship, I believe and pray, may God bless each one of us and open our heart so that we will understand the act of genuine worship. Perhaps we may be not doing, what God is expecting from us. And God will definitely help us to understand so that we can incorporate the idea of genuine worship in our life, and we can offer our worship as per the requirement that we find in the Bible today. First of all, my first point would be genuine worship is submission. Genuine worship is submission. That we find in verse 3. In verse 3, it is written when God commanded uh, uh, Abraham, and he told very clearly, let me read it once again for you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took two of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place for which God had told him. When God commanded him, his commandment was very clear. He told him, go worship and sacrifice your son. Did we find anywhere in the Bible that God had told him to rise up early in the morning? No. God had just told him, go worship your son. But in this passage, we see Abraham rose early in the morning. I really like the word early. That was the act of submission he demonstrated by obeying the commandment of God. He rose early in the morning. He gathered everything he could, for the burnt offering. He collected the wood. He took two of his servants. He took fire with him. He took, his son Isaac, and of course a dagger. He collected everything. He prepared himself completely. God did not tell him anything how to prepare for the burnt offering, but he did that. Not just had told God had told him, you just go and offer your son as a burnt offering, but he did rest of the things. That act of preparing himself for the burnt offering shows that he was completely submissive. My dear friends, if I were there, I would have definitely given so much of excuses. And it is very difficult. If God will ask me today to sacrifice my son, I will have definitely tell him, God, don't you care for my son? Don't you remember your promises? All that. What do we have today that God is asking us to sacrifice? Are we submissive to those things? Are we submissive to sacrifice all those that are so dear to us? And God is asking us to sacrifice those things from us. And that will be our true submission to the while performing the uh, worship. I remember in 2002 we got married, me and my wife, and actually we both the brothers were married together at the same time. We had a same one bridal feast, and in the due time, very next year, my brother had a child, but my wife could not conceive for next 4 years. And I remember, meanwhile, my cousin brother had a baby, and me and my wife, we went to visit the baby in the nursing home, Dr. Trompe's nursing home, Nirmala Trompe. And my auntie was there, and just because my wife had not conceived by then, my auntie said, "Don't touch the baby because you are a barren woman, and if you touch the baby will die soon." And that was very painful for us. And so many our dear, close relatives also, they suggested us. They said, since your wife is not conceiving, you better go for a baby adoption. And that was very easy. Okay, I could have gone for that. I could have adopted a baby, believing that God is not going to give me my own biological son. I could have believed their words and adopted a baby. But I didn't do that. I was submissive. I had decided and knew for sure that God is going to give me my own son, my own baby. And we were praying for that. Many people, even our close relatives, said, it's not happening, so go for a baby adoption. I remember me and my wife, we had prayed together, And in the due time, God gave us a baby. And you'll be surprised, she was found with rubella. I didn't know, I was hearing that term for the first time in my life. God said, I mean, the doctor said, when somebody has rubella, the baby comes out to be immature. Premature delivery takes place, or maybe baby will find the baby half formed. If the eye is there, the leg will not be there, like that, all that with all infirmities. The doctor said, if when a woman has rubella, these are the consequences, most of the time seen. But during that 9 months period, we prayed and believed in God, and we were submissive to His commandment. God's gift is not improper, is not half, or is God always gives a perfect gift. God always gives us a perfect gift, and we believed in that. And the doctor had given the date for delivery was 4th February 2006. My son came out, and my wife delivered the son on 5th February 2006, the very next day. God, through that only, wanted to prove that it was not a premature delivery. The term was over, and right after that, God gave us the baby. And my son was completely okay, without any infirmity. God demonstrated His love, His faithfulness. When we submit ourselves, God shows us how faithful He is, how generous He is, and there is nothing impossible for Him. We have to be submissive when God calls all of us for something. That's what Abraham did. It was very difficult. Okay, for Abraham must have been very difficult. He didn't raise a question. He didn't give any excuse. He just obeyed. Simply went what God had commanded. Exactly did what God had commanded him. The first uh, point or the character is genuine worship is always submissive. The second thing that I want to share with you today is genuine worship is steadfast. Genuine worship is steadfast. Abraham, the very previous chapter says, Abraham had just performed an act of worship in Beersheba. There, he had built an altar, and everything was well with him. And during that time, when everything is fine with us, God performs. I mean, something comes that demands a lot of challenges in our life, and that's what happened in Abraham's life. We find in the whole chapter, the previous chapter, chapter 21 of Genesis, everything was well with Abraham. And the very next chapter says Abraham was Abraham had uh, test. He had to go through a testing. This is what happens most of the time. It's very easy for all of us to worship God when everything is good, when everything is fine in our life. We don't have any sickness in our life. There's no financial crisis in our life. Everything goes well. And it is really difficult in our life to worship God when difficult time arises. Don't you believe that? It is really difficult for us to worship God. If there is sickness, we forget to worship God. If there is, any crisis, there is brokenness in the family, our children go off course, anything, it's very difficult to worship God. But Abraham performed a true worship when he had to go through a difficult time. And what was the difficult time? God had commanded him to worship, to offer his son as a burnt offering. It was difficult, but he performed. He remained steadfast. In 2009, I had to take care actually during 2004 to 2009. I remained in Cuttack, and before that, I was living in Patna. And during that 4 or 5 years of time, I had to take care of my mom because my mom was not keeping well. She was a diabetic patient. She had high blood pressure, then high triglycerides was there, and everything. I had to take care of her. I used to take her to the hospital, have her medicines and all. And God told me very specifically. I was though there in the ministry earlier for full time. I was into full time ministry, but in 2009, God told me very specifically to leave the place and go to Uttarkashi. There, God wanted me to be used in the harvest fields in a certain ministry. I was into Compassion International as a project manager of a particular project there. We had 300 children with us. But before leaving Cuttack in 2009, it was difficult for me because my mom said, if you go from here, who will take care of you? Because who will take care of my medicine? Who will take me to the doctors and have me checked? And there's no one. Though my brothers were there, they were living in different places. That's a different story. But I was there to take care of my mom. My mom said, who is going to take care if you go from here? I said, Mom, God is there. Don't worry. He will be fine. And I went there, and my mom was fine until the due time when God took her to be with Him in 2015. She went to be with the Lord. I remained steadfast. I did not hesitate to go because I knew that God is clearly calling me to be there in Uttarkashi and be there in the ministry field and serve Him. That's what we see from the life of Abraham. In the good time when he had in the past, he was faithful, he served the Lord, and he built altars and he performed all the duties, as far as true worship is concerned. But in the time when uh, things were not good, he also remained faithful and he remained steadfast as well. How do we see in our life? How do we see our life when God asks us to do something, to perform something? Are we able to remain faithful? Are we able to remain submissive? Are we able to remain steadfast? Because when we remain steadfast and submissive, then we can say that we are performing our true worship to God. The third thing that I want to share with you today is genuine worship is separation. He was submissive, he was steadfast, and he was separated. In verse 5, we see he, before going to the mountain, he saw the mountain from a distance, and then he told his servants to, to be there with the donkeys. Very specific. Okay. He told his servants to be there, and he went just with his son and the things that he required for burnt offering. He had taken wood and the dagger and the sun, everything. But he had specifically asked the servant and the donkey to be there, the servants to take care of the donkey. He separated himself from the worldly care and went to worship. What are there that we are surrounded and tangled with us, that are really dragging us back from true worship? Do we have any worldly care? Is there anything that holding us back from true worship? Like Abraham, we have to leave them aside so that we can go ahead, worship our true God, worship and perform the true, worship our God and perform the true worship. It's very difficult sometimes. When if you see Mark chapter 1, verse 35, we see Jesus got up early in the morning, he separated himself and he went to a solitary place where he worshipped God. That we have to be separated, my dear friends. if we want to perform true worship for the Lord. And if we are unable, then something is holding us back. There are three things we need to remember in order to perform true worship. First is we need to submit ourselves completely. We need to be steadfast. And the last one is we need to separate ourselves from the worldly care. Then only we will be able to worship our God. When in 2020, principal in a school there, in a CBSE board affiliated school, and 2020, the last day of last working day of in that school was on 31st of March was the last working day, and then we did a little bit of preparation and we started from there on 8th of April. I am a diabetic person and I also have high blood pressure, and it was difficult for me to drive all through from Uttarkashi to Cuttack. It's about 3,000 kilometers. I have a car, so it's difficult for me. So I was depending on one of my friend from other belief, faith. I had invited actually him to come and drive the car along with me. Then what happened? All of a sudden, my friend said he is unable to go there. My friend denied. It was a very difficult time for me because I was not believing in my own. I mean, I had completely believed that I won't be able to drive the car all through 3,000 kilometers. It was difficult, but my wife, she was encouraging me. She said, "Don't worry. Even if your friend doesn't turn up, then God is there with us. He is always there with us. Just believe in God. He will give you strength to travel." And that encouraged me a lot. And you won't believe, within just 3.5 days, we crossed 3,000 kilometers. We reached here safely, without any harm, neither to us nor to our vehicle. Everything was good. And I can't even take one single person credit to myself. I can't give it to me. I mean, all credit goes to only God, because I could feel that He is there with me and His protective hands are always there protecting me from all possible dangers. Friends, when we submit ourselves completely, when we surrender ourselves completely, when we believe in the strength of God for our life, God is there to take care of everything. Perhaps we are confined within the rituals, within the four walls of rituals, are unable to perform our true worship. But God is asking us, all of us, to see whether our life is worth true worship. We need to understand, we need to examine ourselves so that it will be easy for us to perform true worship in our life. May God bless each one of you. This is short sharing.